Taiwan's cabinet slashes subsidies for local governments, blaming budget cuts by the opposition. TSMC goes all in Germany, announcing a new chip design center to open this year. Taiwan's AI innovators are all abuzz for a new industry, drones. Plus, meet the world's oldest badminton player, Taiwan's very own Lin Youmao. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Betty Chen. Disagreements over Taiwan's general budget have sown deep divides down party lines. The cabinet recently announced that it is slashing subsidies to local governments to comply with legislative budget cuts, and the ruling party says it's the opposition's fault. Leslie Liao has more.
Two sides, one budget. Last week, Taiwan's cabinet announced that the central government will cut subsidies to local governments by 25%. It's a move that the ruling Democratic Progressive Party is pinning on the country's opposition.
那怎么会突然今年啪一个暴跌呢 ？Again， 还是回到事情的症结点，蓝白砍预算。
Taiwan's legislature controls the country's general budget. And the opposition-held chamber is deeply fractured. The DPP is frequently at odds with the main opposition Kuomintang and the smaller Taiwan People's Party. A bevy of issues divide the two sides, but none are as contentious as the country's general budget. The ruling DPP's cabinet originally drafted a $100 billion proposal for the year. But opposition lawmakers cut that proposal by a record 7% and passed the revised spending bill. The bill stipulates that the cabinet must make discretionary cuts of $2.1 billion to its own budget. The ruling party now says the opposition forced the cabinet into cutting local government subsidies.
他就只说了，你给我再删636亿，我不管你要删什么，省预算可以这样子蛮横不讲理吗？
The KMT, which holds a majority of the country's local government seats, has shot back, saying that the cabinet's decision is unlawful.
一般补助款是法定中央对地方的义务，也就是一定要拨付的，它并非是计划性补助款。
And KMT Chair Eric Zhu is now urging local governments to take legal action against the central government.
克扣这些应发的款项是属于贪污治罪条例严重的罪行。我再一次强调，不是只有地方政府可以告，市议会、地方议会也可以告。
From the legislature to the cabinet to now local governments. Fractures over the budget are showing even more cracks, ones that threaten to split ruling and opposition parties even further. Patrick Chen and Leslie Liao for TaiwanPlus.
The Taipei District Court has extended former Taipei Mayor Ko Wen-je's detention by another 2 months in an ongoing corruption case. Ko and 3 other defendants will now remain in custody until August 1st. The court's ruling cited the risk of the defendants colluding, adding that several witnesses in the case have yet to testify. The Taiwan People's Party, which Ko used to lead, is calling the ruling unacceptable. It says there's a lack of concrete evidence to justify extending Ko's detention. Ko has been detained since last September. He's charged with bribery related to a development project during his time as mayor, as well as mishandling political donations while running for president last year. Taiwanese chip giant TSMC is expanding its footprint in Europe. The chipmaker says it will open a new design center in Munich by late 2025, supporting high-performance chip development for AI, automotive, and industrial uses. TSMC is also part of a tech coalition investing in a new $11 billion plant in Dresden, alongside Infineon, NXP, and Bosch. Executives say the new Munich hub could play a key role in Europe's semiconductor ambitions by offering advanced design and AI-ready capabilities. The announcements come as Europe scrambles to catch up in a global AI race. For more on what these new investments in Germany might mean for TSMC, Europe, and the global chip industry, Reese Air spoke to Marco Metzger, a memory chip expert and chief operating officer at Numonda.
Why is TSMC choosing to open this design center and new plant in Germany now? And what strategic advantage might this give them in the European markets?
Munich has two of the best universities in Germany, the LMU and TUM. And these universities, they have like a flow of good engineers and designers. So that's also the reason why Apple has invested $1 billion in a design center in Europe, while Bosch, Infineon, and XP, they all have around Munich like design centers. And keep in mind, in Munich, we have BMW, automotive. Audi is not far away. So there's a lot of connections also with the type of customers what TSMC is looking forward to fill in the factory in Dresden.
What role could the design center in Munich play in helping Europe catch up in this global AI race?
There's a term which says AI everywhere. And this AI everywhere means literally everywhere, in every type of application, in every type of household application you have everywhere. Now, this artificial intelligence does not always need like this crazy power what an NVIDIA chip does. And I definitely think that this is kind of an entry point in Germany to be able to have a design center there on top of the chip companies we have already. Plus, we also have a manufacturing site in Dresden where we can do this. And we also have some packaging sites, like in Amcor in Portugal, who is also able to package besides TSMC. So it's a start, but I think it's not something where Europe immediately competes and can have like a similar kind of CPUs or GPUs AI processor like in the USA or like in Taiwan is produced. But for our market segment, definitely a very good boost to make AI-related ecosystem.
Can we expect any technological marvels to be coming out of Germany anytime soon in regards to chips?
I think it's specifically in the industries, right? It's like in automotive, right? ADAS, autonomous driving. Do you also need very powerful chips in order to manage this? Do you need a system architecture, which is supporting all of this? And I think TSMC was a big win for Europe and especially for Germany. And coming to this cluster in Dresden, where you have already several companies, I mean, Bosch, XFab, there's a lot of companies already there who nurture the system. That's very, very good for Germany in order to play a role in the next wave of AI. I think the first wave of AI, this is basically going on. It's very difficult to jump in there. But the second wave, where you have AI everywhere, I think this is a very good entry point for Europe.
That was Marco Metzger, a memory chip expert and COO at Numonda. Taiwan is trying to build up a drone industry. It wants to use drones in its own defense and also benefit from the China-US rivalry. Louise Watt reports.
Manufacturers at an AI innovation center in southwestern Taiwan are giving visitors from Asia a taste of what the country hopes will be its next big product: drones. Already the world's leading semiconductor hub, Taiwan is now trying to build a drone industry. It's mostly producing drones for civilian uses like disaster response and traffic management. But it's also making drones for military purposes, part of a shifting defense strategy as it faces increasing threats from China, which claims sovereignty over democratic Taiwan.
Well, we know that based on the war in Ukraine, they've been using a lot of drones because they might be short of manpower. So this can be the same situation in Taiwan as well, because we don't have as many manpower compared to China.
In developing a drone industry, Taiwan is also competing with Beijing on another level. It wants to become an alternative supplier to China, which dominates drone making. As the US and other countries look to reduce dependence on Chinese manufacturers, Taiwan hopes it can step in. Here in the rural county of Jiayi, it set up a base for drone development and testing, part of its plan to become an Asian hub of drone supply chains for democratic nations. Legislator Chen of the ruling Democratic Progressive Party says he believes Taiwan is on the right track, but that it should target its own market first.
I would urge the Ministry of National Defense to open more bids to make sure that we have enough during the conflict time. Well, we hope that day will never come, but we need to stockpile those things so when the time comes, we have enough. And this is also a great deterrence to China to tell them we are going to prepare.
Here in Jiayi, Taiwan is demonstrating to potential Japanese suppliers and customers that its drone industry is already off the ground. Now it is trying to scale it up so the country can produce enough drones to also help protect itself in any future conflict with China. Hank Xu, Ethan Chen and Louise Watt for TaiwanPlus.
We heard there in that report from Chen, a legislator for Taiwan's ruling Democratic Progressive Party. He's been a strong supporter of developing the country's drone industry. Louise Watt spoke to him further.
How important is it for Taiwan to have an AI drone industry?
It's very important. The threats we are facing right now, the challenges we are confronting right now. Chinese PLA have like millions of drones available if they should start any conflicts in the Taiwan Strait. So we need to have AI-driven drones to balance, or at least to make sure we can deter China from their aggressions.
At the moment, around 90% of components needed to produce drones can be made in Taiwan, but that still leaves around 10%, some of which may be sourced from China. So how can Taiwan reach its goal of a non-red supply chain?
Our ministries of national defense had proven to be very good evidence that we are on the right track. So usually we purchase like 110% more than we reserved. So the reason why we do that is to make sure that we check every single UAV, check as many as possible, like say 10% of the drones, to deter the manufacturers from trying to disguise as Taiwanese-made drones. So this 10% is one of the evidence that our departments, our ministries are trying very hard to make sure the supply chain is non-red. Even though that means we have to pay more, even though that means there are not many economic incentives to do so, but for national security, this is something we have to sacrifice.
How big a player internationally do you think Taiwan can become?
As a member of National Defense and Foreign Affairs Committee, I think I am targeting Taiwan's own market first. The very reason, I mean, we could definitely sell our drones for civic purposes to our allies in Japan, in Philippines, in the United States, etc. But we are facing a challenge like never before, right? We are the one who is confronting China, another superpower. But as responsible international player, I think we have moral responsibility and strategic reason to support Ukraine to win the war. The very reason is they are using the drones against much bigger opponents, right? The much larger scales aggressors like Russia, right? And they successfully sustained for 3.5 years. At the very beginning of the war stage, President Zelensky was saying we should produce 1 million. That was their goal, and then 2 million, and then 3 million, and now it's 4 million. So if they can do that, so can we.
That was Democratic Progressive Party legislator Chen speaking with Louise Watt about Taiwan's domestic drone industry. 4 Chinese Coast Guard ships entered Taiwanese waters off the outlying Kinmen Islands, but Taiwan's Coast Guard says it's chased them away. The Coast Guard says it deployed 4 patrol boats to escort the Chinese ships out of the area on Wednesday morning. It comes after a similar incursion on Tuesday afternoon that also involved 4 Chinese Coast Guard vessels. Taiwan's Coast Guard says incursions like these are gray zone warfare tactics, and they will increase surveillance ahead of the Dragon Boat Festival, which is coming up this weekend. Southeast Asian regional bloc ASEAN has invited China and Persian Gulf states to its latest summit, hoping closer economic ties with them will limit the bite of U.S. tariffs. Jamin Tres reports.
A who's who of world leaders and diplomats takes to this stage in Kuala Lumpur, opening a summit that could have a big impact amid a looming global trade war. This is a meeting of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN, but there are important guests. The 6 members of the Middle Eastern Bloc, the Gulf Cooperation Council, all have representatives here. And China is here too, represented by Premier Li Qiang. Host and Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim greets him personally. Though other topics like the civil war in Myanmar are on the agenda at this 3-way meeting, the shadow of U.S. tariffs is hard to avoid. As Ibrahim says, trade with the U.S. remains important, but it's also important to make sure ASEAN countries stand firm and stick to the bloc's interests as a whole in talks with the Trump administration.
On tariff, for example, while proceeding with bilateral negotiations, Zafar was there in the States, but the consensus was to have some sort of understanding amongst ASEAN that decisions should not be at the expense of any other country. So we will have to protect the turf of 650 or 660 million people.
Building closer economic links with the Middle East and China is one way the bloc hopes to manage the risks of trade conflict and economic uncertainty. Leaders like the Crown Prince of Kuwait see a lot of mutually beneficial potential.
In the economic and investment fields, we are pleased to be the 7th largest ASEAN trading partner in 2023, with a total of $138.7 billion, and we expect to see an average 30% growth in trade to reach $180 billion by 2023. The amount of opportunities that can be invested on both sides is huge, and what has been achieved so far confirms that we are on the right track.
China used the occasion to voice its backing for the removal of trade barriers. As the only country the Trump administration hasn't paused tariffs on, it faces the most immediate challenges. But it also sees promise in closer trade ties elsewhere, both with its Southeast Asian neighbors and Arab states further afield.
我们要坚定不移地扩大区域开放，努力把三方市场、三方地区构建成一个 资源、技术、人才等更加高效流通，贸易投资更加自由便利的共享大市场。
Malaysia's Anwar Ibrahim says the countries here today have 2.15 billion people between them and a GDP of nearly 25 trillion US dollars. The hope at this summit is that however U.S. tariff policy swings, this collective bulk will make it so no one country is left totally exposed. Fu Huahong and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
French President Emmanuel Macron has touched down in the Indonesian capital Jakarta, the second stop of his Southeast Asia tour. He's set to meet Indonesia's President Prabowo Subianto before both leaders visit an Indonesian military academy in Java on Thursday. Singapore will be the final stop of Macron's 3-nation trip. He first visited Vietnam and signed $10 billion worth of deals in the face of steep U.S. tariffs. A new report from an Australian foreign policy think tank says developing and low-income countries owe record debts to China. This comes after a decade of China's Belt and Road Initiative, a global infrastructure development funding plan. But now, instead of lending aid, China is waiting to call in its debts as it faces diplomatic and domestic pressure. To learn more about this, our reporter Tiffany Wong spoke with Riley Duke, author of the report and research fellow at the Lowy Institute.
So your report touches on the changing trajectory of China's Belt and Road Initiative from being a major lender to developing countries to now holding back as it waits to collect on its debts. Why do so many countries owe money to China now? And where is China still lending out funding to, if any?
China's Belt and Road Initiative was in full swing in around 2016, 2017. And for most of those, or a majority of those loans, China's actual loan terms offer 5 to 8 year grace periods. And so 5 to 8 years on the mid-2010s meant that this period now, around the sort of mid-2020s, was always going to be a crunch period. And then there was one other factor that has sort of increased the wave of repayments that we're seeing now, and that's China's participation in the Debt Service Suspension Initiative, the G20 initiative during the pandemic. So this was an international deal that saw countries pause repayments. That is why we're at record levels in 2025. On the topic of where China's lending has been most resilient, our analysis shows two key groups. One of them we sort of think about as being sort of strategic, and the other one's more about resources. China has continued to lend. The majority of its remaining lending has gone to countries that are critical minerals producers and are battery metals exporters. But on the strategic front, China still lends to all of its neighboring countries quite heavily. And then the other factor, and the one that's most relevant for Taiwan, is that China has lent a lot to countries when it's tried to secure the One China policies. Honduras in 2023, Nicaragua in 2021, the Solomon Islands, Burkina Faso, the Dominican Republic. All these countries saw big, largest of their kind loan deals from China in the aftermath of swapping from Taiwan and adopting the One China policy.
So China has now responded to your report, saying that they do follow international conventions and market rules. Now, do you think the international community will put on more pressure to China to try to change the way that its infrastructure funding works? And what do you think China's strategy will be going forward?
I think public outreach from China on the topic is likely to increase in the next few years because for all developing countries, 2024 was a record year for payments. And then for the most vulnerable and low-income countries, 2025 was a record year. So for each country that China is engaged with as a partner that it has also lent to, being a debt collector is not diplomatic by nature. And so it will have to play this balancing act between recouping the money that it's lent out and then also managing its relationship with that country. Whether that causes a sort of a big change in how China approaches these things is very difficult to say. But there has been some positive signs that China has been more likely to engage in debt restructuring deals. We've seen a few cases in Africa where China has come to the table, but there are still big barriers to China offering debt haircuts right down of its debts.
That was Riley Duke, Research Fellow at the Lowy Institute. The World Masters Games and International Multi-Sports event is in full swing in Taipei. Among those taking part in the Games is the world's oldest badminton player, Lin Youmao. Our reporter Sandy Chi went to meet him to find out the secret of how he's still playing at the age of 104.
Now entering is the embodiment of lifelong utility, Mr. Lin Youmao, representing inclusion.
The crowd goes wild as 104-year-old Lin Youmao walks on stage to ignite the ceremonial flames along with 4 other Taiwanese iconic figures, kicking off the World Masters Games.
进去的时候，我的心情上非常的幸福，又感觉到荣幸。
Ling is a living legend, the world's oldest active badminton player who has been playing for over half a century. At the Masters Games in Taipei, he took part in an exhibition doubles match with Taiwanese Olympic gold medalist Li Yang as his partner. Ling claimed victory against Li Yang's father and his former coach. Why was the game only an exhibition match? Purely because Ling has nobody else in his age category to compete against.
因为我年纪大，这么大的年纪能够到球馆站在那边的人就是很少。 如果也有100岁的组跟我来配我，这次我参加比赛，因为不管怎么样呢，羽毛球最高到80岁为止，没有100岁、90岁、100岁更没有。那么我100岁的话，就是我一个人了。
Ling has been passionate about sports from a young age, with early interests ranging from tennis and pole vaulting to Tai Chi. But it wasn't until the age of 50 that he discovered his true calling, badminton. Since then, he has gone on to win numerous trophies and medals, proving that it's never too late to pursue your passion.
他那个速度也很快，杀球下去，救球下来哇，人家这如果旁观的人啊，都是掌声如雷，就是很热闹，很激烈。
For decades, Ling prioritized his health, determined to stay active. He says he's only ever had one injury, an accident while helping train others that cost him his right eye. Still, he has no regrets. His unwavering positivity is what keeps him moving forward. His passion is even shown in his wardrobe.
我呢就一直喜欢穿虎，还有穿虎呢，我比较热情。我这个人生啊，就是多运动啊，多唱歌啊，多跳舞啊，多做好事。
Ling also shared his secret with NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang at the opening ceremony.
So what is your secret to 你的 secret 是？你的秘密，你的维持健康的秘密。多看美女。多看美女。
Ling hits the badminton court 3 times a week, proof that age is no barrier when you have passion. Jansu, Luffy Lee, Rainu, and Sandy Chi for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Before we go, check out this latest trash to trend movement in India, where locals are turning alcohol bottles into stylish home decorations. I'm Betty Chen. Take care and see you next time.